Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Agosta. I serve as the current Director of Campus Communications for RSA and NRHH. So, a little bit about me. I am a current junior actuarial science major with a minor in economics. And some fun facts, I own my own small business where I resell antiques online, and that I work and restore antiques and antique vehicles. So a little bit about my background and why I believe that I have the skills to hold this position. So starting with my freshman year, I was the social chair for the Harrington CC. Back then, the social chair was essentially the programming chair because that position no longer exists. So a little bit of background there for you. And during that position, I planned and executed 5 different events for East Campus, one of them being a large-scale turf event that was very successful with over 100 people attending. Then I went on to run and get the director of programming position for RSA my sophomore year, where I was able to spearhead a new event that got put in place that was going to possibly be a year after year thing, which was Crucial Community Council Conversations, which was supposed to be a after winter event that is going to be annually planned. I also was able to plan Resapalooza, which is a large scale event during COVID immediately after it happened, and was able to turn around, get everything set up within a month or so and get that rolling. And then during my freshman and sophomore year, I went through the Rail program and got the Golden Level certification twice. So I also have a lot of experience working with residence halls outside of just RSA. Moving into my junior year, this year, I serve as the Director of Campus Communications for RSA and NRHH. This is a joint position that goes across both organizations. Part of this job is that I allow there to be fluid communication between the two organizations and have them understand what each organization is doing at any given time. As part of this position, I use my programming skills once again to spearhead an objective to have a large-scale joint event between the two organizations, which was very successful, allowing us to gain new members that were going to apply to join our organization, as well as have very important educational sessions and workshops that allowed those people coming to gain something very important, some sort of tool or leadership style that can help them in the future. Outside of RSA and NRHH, I also currently serve as the president of Comedy D, a stand-up comedy group that I started myself last year with a colleague of mine, and this has allowed me to gain some serious presidential skills, such as leading a full team and communication and working from a different point of view, really, from a top-down point of view and seeing how things run from the top, which will also allow me to get a pretty good view from the vice president position, since it is like a upper board level position. Also, as a part of DCC, I gained a lot of skills in Parley Pro and parliamentary procedure, which is a large part of the vice president role. Being able to run elections like Abby is currently doing takes a lot of Parley Pro experience to run successfully and have it run smoothly. So my plans with the vice president position is to use, once again, my programming background to spearhead a new objective to have a third event in the middle of the year. We currently do inaugural ball and end of year banquet, but we currently have a problem with, in the start of the spring semester, getting things to start back up, and we usually have a slow start in the spring semester, and I believe and I hope that having something like a winter ball would allow us to start that spring semester off right with having information already be out there and have our GA be well informed of what's going on. In the coming slides, I will talk a little bit more in depth about what that's going to look like. The second main thing that I'd like to do with my position is to strengthen the transition report. Currently, Abby has done a lot of great work this year, strengthening that system. It was very clunky and out of date. And I believe that what she's done is quite amazing, but I personally believe that it's still a little clunky in the way that it runs and the way that it works. And one of the ways I'd like to try to streamline this is by having positional specific questions in the forms that will allow people to better construct their transition report. Currently, the questions that are there are quite great as a very general transition report, but being able to specify it to certain people may be able to help and make it more efficient. So back to the inaugural ball real quick. As I kind of mentioned, it is quite difficult for RSA to start back up in the spring semester because as we all know, UD has a very long winter break, and it allows people to kind of relax, which is great, but it causes our organization to kind of hit a standstill point, and it's hard to get that back rolling. So I'm hoping that by having something, though it may be during the winter break, but somewhere outside of UD campus, will allow us to knock the rust off before the semester begins. And when the semester starts, we can hit the ground running ahead of possible other organizations and already have objectives starting. And this allows the RSA executive board during these events to have the General Assembly start thinking about what the objectives are for the semester, and maybe to start already thinking about what they're going to plan to make these objectives successful, and start thinking about where they want to go with their residence hall with the semester coming. It allows more time to get those ideas flowing and make a more successful semester. This would also allow the board to inform the GA of any changes that are coming to come in the current semester without having to tell them during the start of classes and during really the most stressful time of any semester, when we're all starting back up and things are all hitting the fan all at once. It's going to be nice to be able to tell everybody before that starts, so we are all together and in a more comfortable place. And then to finish off with the transition report system, I already talked about the specific position questions, but I'd also like to possibly have, the way currently Abby does it is we do monthly transition reports. I would like to do semesterly. That's a bit more robust, that maybe has different level questions, something that would be a bit longer response, so that there's more that's filled out to the transition report when it comes to the end of the year. So you would take what you've put in the transition reports throughout the semester and kind of take one time to really sit down, really think it out, and really put down the important stuff that will go in the transition report. Because with the way we currently do it, we have trouble with having people put very long, substantial answers in their transition report, which at the end of the year makes it very hard for the e-board member to come up with a very good transition report for the person following them, which with obviously current elections like this, it's a very important thing to have in this current time. And I want to thank you all for your time, and I yield my time to questions.
Thank you so much, Connor. If you wouldn't mind keeping your screen shared so that if we need to refer back to any of them, we can. We will now move into a period of question and answer for a duration of 5 minutes, extendable 2 times. Time will start with the first X in the chat.
Yes, Griffin.
All right. So I heard you talk about the transition reports and doing those like semesterly and like doing them towards the end of the year so that you can provide like more feedback on it and stuff. What are your thoughts? I know you mentioned, you said they were doing like positional questions for people. Would you be able to provide like an example, if you could, about like some specific questions that would be on the report? If
Sure.
not, it's all right.
No, I'd love to. So, for example, for your position currently, you serve as the community engagement person, allowing you to work with CCs. And I think it would be a very important question to ask you, what currently have you found troubling with working with CCs in the current climate, and what you found successful, so that you can keep that in mind at the end of the year, right? Because some of the issues, like let's just say when we hit fall semester versus spring semester, the issues could be different what you're facing in your current job. So I think it'd be important to have those type of specific questions written down, so when you think back, you don't have the spring semester problems in your head and not thinking about the fall ones, because they're more relevant in your mind at that time. So I think something like that's very important. Or something like with a finance question, having to ask the finance person, what about the budgeting system is not working correctly, and what would be a way to fix it? And that be a specific question to them, because obviously that would not make sense to ask to everybody. Did that answer your question?
Yes. And is it okay if I do a follow-up, or do you mind, do you throw it over to the next person?
I don't know, Abby, is that allowed?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I'll keep it quick, Sophia. So I know Abby does transition reports. It's sort of, I guess, in a way, because get the e-board members to like not forget like what they did like during the month and all. I feel like during the semester, maybe it'd be a problem, like trying to remember everything in a sense. Like, would there be a way to like prevent this, to make sure like they have everything, like so memorized and stuff?
Well, I'm hoping that,
Because I can understand both points, in a sense.
yeah, I definitely agree. And as like with people that are maybe in more positions that have more going on, of course, there's lots of things to keep in mind. And when I was, deciding my platform, I went back and forth between should we do weekly transcription reports that are like quicker, but like at the same time, I don't feel that that's the best idea because that would take way too much time, right? So monthly is kind of the best way. So I think what I was going to try to do was keep the monthly that Abby's doing and then allow you to look back on those monthly ones and be like, okay, what was I talking about? And then for the semesterly, you sit down with those and go, okay, I talked about what James Smith Thomas McKean was doing. And now that I'm reading over it, I'm remembering these things, and that's more detail that I want to put in my semesterly. So that was what I kind of wanted to do was you give like an intermediate level synopsis, and then when it comes to the semesterly, it's a more specific, more drawn out version, allowing you to have resources to look back on.
So would that be in a sense be the same thing what you said Abby's doing now? Like I thought we were doing the transition reports just at the end of the semester and not the monthly. Like that's what I was confused about.
So currently the way Abby does is that we have just monthlies, and then at the end, when we get to the transition report, we do monthlies throughout the entire year, so fall and spring. And then when it comes to the transition report time when we're supposed to write them, she's just going to give you all of them. And she herself is in the background in some version, which I do not exactly know because she's not specified, somehow stacking them together for us.
So I get what you're saying. So basically we're going to do it for the fall semester and then do it for the spring semester and then do the transition report at the very end. Okay.
Yes.
I think
yes.
so. All right. Sorry. Go ahead, Sylvia.
You kind of already answered my question. I was going to answer what are transition report. I mean, I was going to ask what are transition reports.
I would like to give a more specific synopsis because it's a very like e-board specific thing, which I know was going to cause some questions. So a transition report is what allows our current position to talk to our successor and tell them what they should know, the important facts. And we have tried to, in recent years, try to come up with some sort of system that allows us to, throughout the year, remember what is going on, what is important, and formulate that throughout the year. And currently, we're getting closer to what I think is the perfect system. And it allows the successor to look back also throughout their year at your transition report and go, okay, well, he did this last year or she did this last year, and this didn't work out according to them. So let me try to avoid that and try to do something else. It allows our e-board to be more efficient in the years after. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. Let's see, who was the next X? Next X was a big nut.
I'm sorry that is time. There is another question from me, but I will entertain a motion to extend Q&A for five more minutes. So X in the chat. Heather, you can unmute and make a motion to extend Q&A.
Motion to extend Q&A.
Do we have a second? Second from Sylvia. Awesome, thank you. I will restart the time. So my question was, you mentioned the idea of having a winter ball in order to kind of keep students like connected to us and have an event in the middle of winter so that there's not such a gap in between the fall and the spring. And that's a really great idea. My question is, typically during the winter, right, students tend to travel, go home, take the time off. It's their time to kind of rejuvenate from like all the stuff that they had going on in the fall. So how do you plan to garner interest and foster engagement with your idea of a winter ball, given that students might be, for lack of a better phrase, checked out for the winter?
That is a wonderful question. I believe that the way I see it is, inaugural ball and EYOB is a way for students to kind of relax and celebrate what they've done. So it's not that this winter ball would be any different, right? It's not something we're telling them to come to and they're just going to get lectured at, right? It's kind of a fun get together. I don't want to use any other word for that, but it's a fun little get together that I believe that they'll somewhat be encouraged to come to, just regularly, in the fact that it'll be a fun way to come and be with their friends if they have them across different cabs. And I do understand that it'll be time off and things like that, but with the campus being closed and things like that, it allows us to maybe do it in a nicer venue and actually do something maybe other than UD catering, because the campus will be closed. So I think it would be a nicer, more, I guess you can call it, upscale event environment. And I would try to get maybe a certain speaker that is, wanted, like we've done in the past and things like that. And I would try to, as you said, really just try to make it stack up that people want to come, because I obviously know that is a issue with this idea, but I hope to come up with ways to get around that, of course. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
And Ryan?
Yeah, I actually have a question about the winter ball as well. I think it's a novel idea, and I think it's something that could definitely work. My one follow-up on the idea would just be about cost, right? Inaugural ball, end of year banquet, on a traditional year when we're in person, cost around what, like about $5-ish grand or so. So like, given the implications of that, and some of the ideas you're talking about with an outside venue, a guest speaker, food nicer than UD catering, how would you mitigate sort of the additional costs, given we're seeing less revenues as a result of COVID-19?
Yes, I would, first of all, since there's 3 events and that's usually, that number is usually given for 2, I would use my past programming, experience to budget out those 3 events instead of 2, which somewhat lowers the standards. But first of all, there will be other costs that kind of bake into the same, right? So instead of having to rent out a residence hall space or some sort of school space, which already costs money, I would still be spreading out a space. So there's still cost already entailed. It would just be a little bit more. And in my opinion, UD catering is very expensive in comparison to going somewhere else. So I don't see that being a more expensive item. In the past, from my experience as a programmer, I find that outside food is as expensive and sometimes less expensive than UD catering to have catered. And then lastly, with a speaker, unless they're an outside of UD speaker, they will have to, get paid or somehow, what's the word? Somehow, I guess, reimbursed for their time and coming and speaking. But most of the time we stick with UD faculty, and they do not require that most of the time. So I don't see this being absurdly more expensive than what we already do. But also I know that that RSA specifically has done quite well as far as money is concerned this year. So we may have a better year financially next year. Did that answer your question, Ryan? All right.
Are there any other questions? If so, throw an X in the chat, please. That is time. So at this point, I can either entertain a motion to extend Q&A for an additional 5 minutes if there are more questions, or end Q&A. Whoever would like to make a motion, please put an X in the chat. Somebody put an X in the chat. Lorna.
I make a motion to end Q&A.
Perfect. Do we have a second? Second from Sylvia. Thank you very much, Lorna.